friends. Welcome to Sky House Herbs Podcast. I'm Ashley Ellenboss, a clinical herbalist, and in this space, I share my knowledge and experience with plant medicine to help you on your own journey of healing and transformation. Join me in exploring the ancient wisdom of plant spirit medicine and how it can be used to heal the body, mind, and spirit. We'll talk to experts in the field and share stories from people who've been transformed by powerful plant allies. New episodes are released each Monday, so please subscribe. And now, let's explore this mystical world of plant medicine together. Hey everyone, welcome in. Today we'll be talking about making amends and ways we can use flowers as a ritual for self-forgiveness, for forgiving others, for healing maybe bruised or wounded relationships, and just about the process of moving towards forgiveness itself. Before we dive into it, I would love for you to maybe click and subscribe to this channel and also to like this video if you find it helpful. And as always, I love your comments, so please leave me a comment if you found this to be helpful or if you have any additional questions or things to share. So today's topic came from an Al-Anon meeting that I attended to this morning. So as many of you listeners know, I am a part of the Al-Anon family group, so I'm a member. And basically Al-Anon is a group where if you have been affected by the disease of alcoholism, you are welcomed in. And so I grew up with an alcoholic father. And so from that experience, I am very well qualified to be in the group because there's a lot of themes in the alcoholic home that ring true for many, many people. And through the steps, we just start to understand what happened, how our thinking might have become distorted, how our perceptions of reality became distorted, and then how to live a very fruitful life and a peaceful life. You know, the main tenet is the serenity prayer. You know, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And everything is in that, you know, in that little serenity prayer, because I think for many of us, even if we didn't grow up with alcoholism, there's a part of us that has been injured or has maybe had some life trauma that has brought us out of a place of inner serenity and tranquility. And so because I've been in Al-Anon now for 4 years, I'm it's like every meeting I'm like, oh, right. I start to understand it and really appreciate the teachings even more. So I'm going to be incorporating in step 9 to today's talk because each month in our group that I meet with, we do one step each month. And so it's September. And so we're doing the 9th step. And the 9th step is about making amends. And I just want to read to you what step 9 says. It says, make direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And the idea here is that in step 8 and earlier, you know, you make a list of the people you've harmed or people you've injured. And what's really interesting about this is that one of the things that we often come to understand is that a lot of times the person who's been injured most is the self. And that before we can really make amends with others, we have to make amends with ourselves and to come to terms with the things that we've done. And I was thinking about my own life, and I'll never forget, you know, when I was in college, I went to school in Asheville, North Carolina, and I went on a road trip. So I basically, it was after my sophomore year. I knew that I didn't want to study environmental science, but I didn't know what I did want to study. So me and 4 girlfriends, we bought a van, took my dog, and traveled around the country for a whole semester. So it was about like 3.5 months. We just drove around the United States. And at that time, there was no internet. So we had triptychs or like basically maps. We drove around the country just using maps and stayed at state parks and family along the whole trip. And I was probably about, I guess I was like 19 or 20 when we did the trip. And I didn't know it at the time because I was 19 and 20, but I really had a hard time with control. And I now understand this after being an Al-Anon, that one of the things that can happen to us when we grow up with alcoholism or really any sort of addiction is that children often really try to micromanage and control their environment. They try to control everything around them. And that can look different for different types of personalities. But one of the things that I did during that trip was with my girlfriends is I tried to control everything. And I was reading through one of my journals last month as I was cleaning out our basement. And I was reading through my journal while I was on that trip. And I was so arrogant. And gosh, I didn't like what the girls were eating because I myself had an eating disorder. And I was like, we should start eating healthy foods. And they were like, well, why we? Why don't you just do it? I was like, well, because we need to do this. And I didn't realize that part of what I grew up in the environment of is that the alcoholic family, there is not independence, at least not in mine. There was a lot of codependence and interdependence. And people couldn't make choices for themselves. And there was always, and I didn't even notice this, but in my family, it was always we're going to do this. We're doing that. Why don't we do this better? Because no one wanted to take personal responsibility for their own part in what was happening. And so I just thought in my 20s, that's the way people were. If you love someone, you control them. And if you want them all to do the right thing, then you steer everyone in that direction. But what ended up happening was that these friends started to become very resentful of me. And they didn't grow up in a family like that. So they just saw, gosh, Ashley's really controlling. I don't like the way she's judging us. She has all these, she's just she's really uptight. She can't relax. And she's pretty obsessive about food. And in my journal, as I was reading it, I was like, gosh, I remember that young girl. I remember her, the world felt so big and she was so sensitive that she had to put up all this armor to keep the world out and to keep the people near her safe and what I thought was healthy. Because for some reason in my mind, if everyone was healthy, then they would be safe. And that could be an episode in itself. But anyway, many years later, that trip ended up kind of severing my friendship with those girls because things went on and I didn't like the way they were headed. And so I made a big fuss and a big stink, and I didn't want them to do things that they wanted to do. And so the relationship was injured. And I remember years later, one of the girls wrote me a letter, and I read the letter last month, and I couldn't believe it. It was so honest and so true, and pointed to so many of the things that I was doing that was really harmful to others and harmful to myself. And my friend even said in the letter, she was like, Ashley, I just wish you could see what a beautiful young woman you are. And that if you could just let people live their own life, and if you could just be happy for other people when they're happy, you would be happier. And, your judgments about this and that, really make me feel like you don't really care about me, but you just care about what you think and other people doing what it is you think is right. And at 20, I read it, but I couldn't really hear it. But at 44, I could really hear it. And I really could see that person and how much suffering that young Ashley was going through. And it was several years later, I ran into that friend in Asheville where she was still living. I was visiting. And I just apologized to her. And I said, you know what? You were right. I really was disrespectful and I was really controlling, and I've got some issues I'm working on, and I was projecting them onto you and the other girls, and that was not fair. And I know it damaged our friendship, and I'm really sorry. And she was really, she was open and she listened, and I gave her my number, and I was like, I would love to stay connected with you. So, maybe we could, write letters or something, and here's my email. And she was like, yeah. But I realized, she never reached out to me. There was never any other connection. And what I realized was, Making amends and speaking your truth doesn't necessarily mean that the friendship will be restored, or it doesn't mean the relationship can go back to what it was before the harm was done. But what it means is that the people who were harmed found some peace and, let their opinions and their feelings be known, and that they were vulnerable enough to share what was on their minds and on their hearts. And so in today's meeting, when I was reflecting on things that are happening in my life right now where amends could be made, this line really stood out, which is, except when to do so would injure them or others. And this is an important piece because when we've been harmed, not in the case of my friends, but in the case of people that have really, really harmed us. And I know there's this whole movement of like, forgive those and make amends with, anyone that that's ever hurt you or you've hurt. But we have to be careful because I do think that we can open ourselves up to more harm if we're not really thoughtful. And making amends doesn't mean you lose boundaries. And so as I talk about this topic, and I want to talk about plants too, I'm really aware that not everyone's situation is going to maybe allow for this type of healing and forgiveness, that there are some harms that are so deep and have been so damaging that to forgive yourself might be as far as you can get. To forgive yourself for the ways that maybe you took on that trauma that caused further harm. And maybe forgiving the other person or making amends with them is just not, it's not safe. And so that's a place where you have to just say, I'm going to address this in a different way. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about some rituals and ways that we can use plants and flowers specifically to begin a process of amends. And so the first step to me is forgiving yourself. And there was this great video by this Episcopalian priest, and I've included her. I know I've spoken about this particular clip of hers on YouTube in other episodes, and I'll include the link again. I think her name is Nadia. She has like a hyphenated last name, but I'll include it. But it's called Forgiving Assholes. And this is really, I think, appropriate for where I'm at in my life right now with a family member who's caused a lot of harm in our family, and some of it unforgivable in my eyes. And so what I have to do in this situation is say, it's like a ball and chain, she says. It's like when someone's hurt you and you carry it, it's like you're the one dragging around the ball and chain. So when you forgive someone, it just releases the ball and chain, but it doesn't excuse their behavior. It doesn't let them off the hook. It doesn't say what you did to me was okay. It just says, I'm not going to carry this anymore. I'm not going to carry the burden or the pain anymore. So that is step one. And here's what I would recommend and what I do for myself is I will buy myself flowers. And I know that Miley Cyrus song was such a big hit because I think a lot of us need permission to say, you know what? I can take care of, I can start the process of healing on my own. I don't necessarily need someone else to begin that for me. And so for me as a double Taurus, no matter where I've lived, I've always grown flowers, whether it's been in pots in my apartments or outside in small beds, or now I've got a big garden with tons of flowers, because flowers they're healing. They're signs of joy and reproduction and, hope that things will go on. And it's no accident that there's a whole language of flowers in ancient Victorian times where you could communicate to people just through sending them certain types of flowers. So the first thing that I would say is, if you're interested in making amends of any kind, if you're ready to let something go or ready to apologize to someone for some harm you've done, or you're ready to approach someone and forgive them, start with a process of buying yourself flowers, going into your yard, picking yourself some flowers, and then make yourself some flower tea. And so my favorite herbs for a tea like this would be chamomile is my number one. Chamomile is a nervine relaxant. It calms the nervous system down. It's the mother herb. So it's Chamomilla matricaria. Matricaria mean like care of the mother. And so especially if there's been mother wounds or wounds around femininity or friends that are women, chamomile is just one that's going to just basically mother and soothe the nervous system. So make yourself a cup of chamomile tea. Another flower herb that's really nice for the heart is rose. So this one I like to make as a cold infusion or a very fast hot infusion, because if you let it steep too long, it can get a little bitter. So you can add some rose petals, a little bit of cinnamon bark, let that steep in hot water, maybe for like 4 minutes or 3 minutes as a cold water infusion, maybe a few hours. Strain that and sit with that cup. Or the last one is Tulsi. You can use Tulsi as an herb. That's a really nice one to give you courage if you're feeling like you don't have the energy or the motivation, or you're like feeling really stuck. Tulsi can move energy, and especially move energy through the heart space. So you can make yourself a cup of holy basil or Tulsi tea. And then sit with this tea and a notebook and your flowers. And I want you to start by writing yourself a letter. And sometimes when I haven't had time to sit and write, which I'm sure you're like, okay, who doesn't have time to sit and write a letter? Well, sometimes I don't, and maybe you are too. So one of the things I would do is when I would drive, between pickups with the kids, is I would speak the letter out loud. I would say, "Dear Ashley," and I would just, speak it. So if you don't have time to sit and write, or that's really hard for you, maybe you have some attention, like your attention gets wandery, you can just speak it out loud when you're in a confined space like a car. And in this letter, you're basically going to talk through the situation, why you did the things you did, and why you're still okay. Forgiving yourself, what it is that you might do differently next time, and the things that you were trying to protect, right? So you want to make it a really full letter, really exploring the scenario, the situation, and why you're still okay, and why you're sorry. Why are you sorry now? Why now? Why are you feeling like it's time to approach this particular issue now? And give yourself time to really flesh that out. Then after that, if it feels appropriate, and again, if it doesn't cause harm to yourself or others, maybe you reach out to that person and say, "Hey, when we were traveling and, you wrote me that letter, and, I really was shitty to you, and I'm sorry. I was really selfish and self-centered, and I was hurting. And I see now that I took out my hurt on you. And I'm really sorry for that." And when if you're willing to, you can write it down first. Maybe there's a script you want to write before you make the call, or before you meet with the person for lunch, or before you see that person sometime later in the day. You might want to just jot down a few notes. And one thing that one of my Al-Anon peers who's been in the program for many years said is, stick to the point, make it short, and then walk away after. You don't have to, making an amends or apologizing doesn't have to be this long, lengthy. You don't want it to be this long thing. You just want to say, "Here's what I did. I am sorry." Maybe a few things why, how you're processing it, and that you hope that they'll forgive you, or you hope that they understand, and that they are, ask them, are you willing to, can you move on? Are you interested in repairing our relationship if it had caused that much harm? And then just, see what they say. And then at the end, you kind of say, "Okay, well, thank you for that. I know that this isn't a one walk dog, or, this isn't something that we're going to just fix right this moment. But I did want to call and reach out and offer this, offer these amends, and offer my apology to you. And I hope we can continue our relationship and working on our relationship in the months and years to come." And then you hang up the phone, or you end it. Because one of the things that I'm learning is that, a lot of the reasons that stop people from forgiving and making amends is thinking that everything needs to be fixed right afterwards. But the truth is, it doesn't. A lot of times you apologize, you make the amends, and then it just sometimes takes time for the relationship to heal. But at least you've done your part and you've cut that shackle off of your ankle so that you can freely move through and start making the changes that you wrote to yourself that you want to make and start implementing those changes. Another thing that is really helpful, I think, with flowers is flower bathing. And on the days where I can't do a flower bath, I have rose water spray that I really like. This one is heritage store, but you can really use any type of rose spray. And, roses are so cleansing and clearing, especially for the emotional body. So you can just use this and just let the rose water kind of help. Oh, it feels so good. It's cooling, it's soothing, smells so nice. You get the aromatherapy. And it's just kind of like a symbol of you to yourself saying, I'm letting this go. I'm healing. I'm beautiful. I'm okay. And if you want to, you can also make a flower bath. So you can add some flowers from your garden and add them into a big tub of water and just give it a good mix, and then stand outside in your bathing suit and just pour it over your whole body. It is amazing. I've done this at retreats with women before, and there's not, I mean, men can do it too, of course, but there's just nothing better than having this big bucket of water and flowers. Cold water is even better, and just pouring it over you, or having a friend pour it over you, and just being like, oh my gosh, it's so refreshing. So that's another wonderful technique. And if you can't do it outside, then maybe you can do it indoors in your shower and just do that and just pour that over you and just let it wash through. And, really, I think our bodies carry so many energetic imprints. And if we can, water is such a great cleanser of those energetic imprints. So when we're really trying to let things go, bathing, using water sprays, drinking lots of water, drinking tea, any way of bringing water through the system cleanses and clears the energetic body so that we can let go of things, process things, and then step into our next moment with a little bit more clarity and sort of a new body also in some ways. So I hope that has been interesting and helpful. And I know I shared quite a few personal things today. And I think, one of the things I'm learning as I get older is that we're all more alike than we are different. And that when I can be vulnerable and share things that are true and dear to me, I know, and I've seen it because this has happened with other people in my life, that when they share things that are real and vulnerable to them, it heals me. It opens my eyes. It gives me courage. So I hope that my personal sharings maybe give you a little bit more courage or help you to look more closely at your own things, so that you can work them and heal them and let them go, so that you can step into a life that feels more serene. And again, let's say the serenity prayer. You can repeat it with me if you want to, or just close your eyes and listen. But God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So thank you all for listening. May your day be blessed. Please, as always, leave your comments, subscribe, and like if you found this to be helpful. And I'll see you all again soon.